Hi, friends. This is Wendy Harrop, and welcome to the Say Yes to Yourself podcast. On the Say Yes to Yourself podcast, you'll hear stories from women just like us who are adding the practice of saying yes in their daily lives in big and small ways, and as a result, are experiencing the truth that everybody wins when you say yes to yourself. Saying yes to yourself is a graceful unfolding, an intentional becoming of the very best version of you. It is my hope that in these conversations, we are able to find our truth and be inspired and empowered to live our very best lives. I'm so excited to go on this journey with you, and I look forward to finding a bit of our own story in each other's.
Hey friend, let me ask you something. When was the last time you said yes to comfort? I didn't realize how much I needed that kind of softness until I tried the fabulous loungewear from Cozy Earth. It's not just cozy, it's life-giving. It's the kind of fabric that makes you exhale when you put it on. It drapes beautifully, it feels like a whisper, and keeps you cool thanks to their temperature regulating bamboo fabric. Whether I'm winding down after a full day of chores or journaling in the morning with my cup of coffee, this is the loungewear I am reaching for. It's not just comfort, it's confidence. It's beauty, even when no one else is watching. And here is the best part. Cozy Earth is offering 40% off to our podcast listeners when you use the code Say Yes at checkout. Go to cozyearth.com and say yes to comfort that celebrates who you are. Welcome back to the podcast and happy Friday. It's a good one. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to share these beautiful conversations with you. I know I tell you all the time, I am completely obsessed with this podcast, with the opportunities that I have to meet such phenomenal people and to be in expansive, gorgeous conversations, one right after the other. It's so fun to be me. And I hope you are having an equal dose of fun listening to these conversations as well. If you are wanting a deep dive, if you want to experience what it's like for me on a Thursday when I record, please join me for the next Say Yes Summit. It's August 5th and 6th. Our theme is freedom. And because our theme is freedom, our price for this event is totally free, but you do need to register so that you can get the Zoom link and the replays. We have 8 former podcast guests coming together over 2 days for beautiful, rich, yummy, expansive conversation. And you'll be there live. You can ask questions. You can be in this amazing energy. Who knows? You may be inspired to start your own podcast when you feel how fun it is. Oh my goodness. So, although these conversations are fun and fabulous, so often the catalyst for the work that these amazing women are doing is because something hard and heavy occurred in their lives. And that is certainly the case with today's guest, Emma Tomes. In 2010, Emma, who is the founder of the Mental Health People, her life changed overnight when her eldest son's father died by suicide. She suddenly realized how little she knew about mental health and decided to learn more to help her family. And this was the beginning of a mission to do her best to prevent other families from experiencing something similar. Along the way, she realized that support was not easy to find. And learning more about mental health, Emma decided she could share this knowledge through training and coaching to prevent suffering and further families from experiencing bereavement. The Mental Health People was founded to be exactly what Emma needed all those years ago, and to prevent other families from bereavement by suicide. Further deaths can be prevented. They now support thousands of people who are going through difficult times and big changes, as well as getting in early to help prevent and improve poor mental health. Her work is so meaningful, so impactful, and so beautiful. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Emma Tomes. Emma, I am so delighted to have you here. I am very eager for this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining me. It's great to be having this conversation with you and such an important topic, right?
Agreed. So I would love just to kick us off, go right
hmm
in with knowing, how are you saying yes to yourself in this season?
Yes, right. Okay. And I was thinking about this before trying to be prepared and all of that great stuff. And I was thinking, for me, there's some big yeses in there, but there's also some smaller yeses, you know? So, and I think those smaller yeses can combine and be really impactful, just as if you say no, those little no's can build up, right? So there are some things that are happening for me in my business. So things like working in the areas that like interest me and get me excited. And I guess those are sort of bigger things. And then the smaller things are I'm moving office, so I don't have such a long commute. So, and I think those little things are about supporting my own mental health and well-being so I can be in a better place to be able to support the people that I work with. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. It's all of these decisions, the
Yeah.
culmination of all of them, but
hmm
also the woman that we are in making those decisions and the women we're becoming because
hmm
of those decisions, and also this beautiful reminder that we consistently and constantly have the opportunity to
hmm
course correct, that
hmm
none of these decisions are the one decision. And, they don't even have necessarily more weight than any other. They can certainly have more consequence or more impact, but being present, which we were talking just for seconds before I hit record, there is no other time than this generous
hmm
present moment. And we
Yeah.
can allow and enjoy what is happening. We can use that information to celebrate. We can use that information to grieve. We can use
hmm
that information to course correct. But it's just this reminder and this awareness of our agency and our power,
hmm
even at times, which you are the expert in this, but in times when this present moment has me feeling powerless.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And as you were talking just then, I was thinking there's kind of a step before saying yes, isn't there? It's like knowing that you have choice. Because
Hmm.
sometimes we just that in that autopilot because we're not here, we're sort of just moving on in this kind of autopilot space. So the to acknowledge that actually I do have choice, I could say no to myself or I could say yes to myself, or maybe there's another choice in that as well. And just so I feel like sometimes if we haven't got that step before, then that's
Sure.
really tricky to say yes to yourself because you're just in default mode, which is, and this is where the commute was coming in for me. It was like, gosh, I work for myself now. I have the choice. I don't have to do such a long commute. I could find somewhere closer to me. But I think if you're in autopilot, you don't stop, do you? You don't pause to go, okay, is this right for me? Does this work for me?
Oh, you're so right in all of that, because there's, and we hear so much from the guests that I interview for this podcast, these reflections, these admonitions to stop,
Mm,
to take a breath, to, quote unquote, check in with yourself to recognize how that feels in your body. And I know for many years, if I were to hear somebody suggest that I do any of those things, first, I would have thought that it was incredibly tone deaf. They clearly didn't hear how giant
Mm-hmm.
these obstacles that I have just listed are. They need more information. I would have thought that's too hard. I don't even, I don't have time.
Mm.
I don't have time to
How do you even do that?
stop. Like, what are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
talking about? I'm holding this whole thing together. If I stop, I don't
Mm,
even know what will happen, and then will take more time for me to fix it. And we can
mm,
lobby for our limitations all day long. And then this idea of, okay, I'll stop, but I don't know what this check in with my body nonsense is, or this
right.
breath work eye roll of a thing. I'm breathing. I don't need to pay attention. But
Yes.
oh my gosh, these unbelievable arguments that keep us in the hamster wheel that we don't even want to be in, but we've convinced ourselves that none of that's going to work and it takes too long and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And often it only comes when our body shuts down,
Yeah. Can't take
circumstances,
anymore. Yeah, yeah.
right? Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
what are you experiencing and what comes up for you in that?
Well, I feel like when you were talking about that, that was like that was me. That was me before I had therapy, before I and I'm such a huge fan of therapy, but I also think getting the right therapist is really important and having that right relationship. But I think for me, what therapy gave me was that pause, and it was I don't know if you've heard of the phrase like body doubling before. It's quite
Oh,
a
no.
oh, okay. So body doubling. So I'm quite newly diagnosed with ADHD, and so
Okay.
body doubling, having somebody sit with you while you do something, is really powerful. So having a therapist to sit with you and hold that space with you and go, right, okay, let's really sort of focus on this, and what is it that you need? And I don't know about you, but my life has been very much about what does everyone else need, you
Right.
know? So when a therapist sits with you, or a coach, and sits with you and says, what is it you need right now? And what's going to be most important for you for this week? That then starts and breaks that cycle of not pausing. And for me, that was the beginning of it. And
Mm.
yeah, and it's why I'm such a huge advocate for therapy and support, because it's tough doing stuff on your own. It's really tough.
Which is so fascinating because that's all the argument that we use to keep us from
Mm,
that as
mm-hmm,
well, that I have to do all of this. I
mm.
am the only one who can think of all of these things for the children, for the house, for
Mm-hmm,
the job, for the marriage, for the friendships, for the business, for, if
mm-hmm,
I pause, this whole thing crumbles. And I loved what you said about this body doubling and this person
mm-hmm,
holding space for us, because it's just a reflection. They're reflecting back what is happening, but they have a clearer view because they're
mm-hmm,
not looking through our filter of nonsense that
mm-hmm,
we can't read the label from inside the bottle, as they say.
mm-hmm.
And it's just another person that is going to allow us to channel those rehearsed soundtracks in
Yeah,
our mind, because it makes a lot of sense when it's swirling around in there. But sometimes when it leaves our mouth and we see the face of the person that heard us,
yeah,
they go, is
mm,
really is that really what you think? Is that true?
mm. Yeah, that gentle challenge, isn't it? And I think this is why the relationship with a therapist is so important, because if you don't feel safe with that therapist, if they challenge you, that's not going to feel comfortable. But if you've got a really good relationship with your therapist and they challenge you and go, okay, I hear what you're saying, you're thinking of doing X, Y, and Z. Is there another way? Does it have to be this way? And it's just that helps you to slow down. And, what we're talking about is to choose like what's right for us rather than what we should do or what we think we should do or what everyone else expects of us.
Yes. And we can't outsource that to another
Mm.
person, even though that might have been our habit this whole
Yeah.
time. And nobody was mad that we were conforming to the needs of everybody
Mm.
else. But even in these relationships with a therapist, with a coach, with
Mm.
someone that's holding sacred space, that's an invitation for us, it's an opportunity to shift that thinking, but also to remind us of what we already know. So the
Mm-hmm.
roadmap is inside of us, and that
Yeah.
therapist is not, they don't have a copy of my map. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad I found them so they can tell me what I need to do. Just tell me what I need to do. We already know.
Yeah. Yeah. We're just not listening to ourselves, right? We gotta
Right.
we gotta listen, and that's so hard. It's so hard when there's so much noise. That's what I found was like the
Yeah.
noise from, social expectations, my parents' expectations, my children's expectations, all of those kinds of things. It's really hard to be able to listen to yourself. And that the kind of common phrase, which is trust your gut and things like that. It's really hard when there's lots of noise and there's lots of stuff that's going on. Yeah.
Right. So besides finding an amazing therapist, like what are, and even in that, what are you finding with your clients? What are you finding in your own
Mm,
experience?
yeah.
How do we slow down?
Yeah.
How do we try? I mean, we know mastery comes from repetition and
Hmm.
this generous present moment, knowing we
Hmm.
have agency, but how are you finding that that can work in,
Hmm.
even if you're choosing a specific situation?
Yeah, yeah. And I think with most of these things, it's about starting small, right? Because big feels overwhelming. It's like, oh gosh. And then also that can stop us from making any sort of movements because it just feels too big. So it's that kind of small steps. So the creating that small space, and this is why, I just think that, therapy can be such a great start because you're carving out what, an hour a week? Yeah. So you're starting. That's a really great starting point to go, okay, this hour is for me. It's for me, my thoughts, my feelings. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the clients that I work with, a lot of their people come into the room as well, even though they're not there physically. They're sort of, but
Right.
what about my husband or what about my children? And so this is where, as the therapist, my work is to go, yeah, I hear that. And let's come back to you. So we're kind of quieting that noise that I was talking about earlier.
Mhm.
It's kind of, or just putting it to one side. So it's like, right, okay, that's your partner's needs, that's your children's needs, that's your boss's needs, all of that kind of stuff. But let's just take a moment and focus on what would, if none of that was there, what is it that you would do? And I think sometimes that's the kind of programming that can happen, because if you're doing that once a week and you've got someone that's helping you do that, then the bits in between each session, you are more likely to start doing that, right? So
Right.
the habit forms. Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And I love that even though you're saying we're blocking this time on our calendar and it's just
Hmm.
for us, there's so much power in the fact that it requires another person
Hmm.
and that there's an accountability piece,
Yeah, yeah.
because not even just the accountability of my commitment to myself is real, but an accountability, because if this is already our practice to default to
Hmm.
what everybody else's need is, I'm also not going to miss this calendar appointment because I don't want to inconvenience you as my
Yeah.
therapist, right?
Yeah.
So even
Yeah.
though there's still a little bit of codependency in there,
Yeah.
it's a beautiful bridge because these practices, they're not all bad, they're not all
Mm.
wrong. You can still be considerate and aware of the needs of everyone else. We're
Mm-hmm.
just shifting from doing that with the result of self abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
We're
Mm-hmm.
doing that from the place of self empowerment, where we know that when we say yes to ourselves, everybody wins because we're now, giving from our saucer. We talk about this all the time on the podcast. We fill our cup till it overflows and we give from our saucer. And when our
Mm.
saucer is empty, then
Mm-hmm.
we fill our cup again, and it doesn't take that long because it was already at the top. But
Yeah.
if we're giving from our cup, when we hit the
Yeah.
bottom of that, it's really ugly and it takes a long time before we're in a place where we have the capacity to give again.
Yeah, and you're so right. And it's really interesting. I think some people can find it really hard to come into therapy to give themselves that hour, like, oh, I could spend that money on my family or something else, right? Or, or it feels self-indulgent, and sometimes what brings people to therapy is, I need to be a better wife, or I need to be a better partner, or I need to be a better mum, or so even the intention can sometimes be about somebody else, and that's okay, right? That's okay. But I love what you said there, because you're right. Like, and I've seen the transformation with my clients when they start attuning back into themselves. Their relationships improve. They're more honest in their relationships, which creates more security and safety for their loved ones. Yeah, they're doing things that make them happy, which means they're a happier person to be around, rather than the kind of, and I'm sure we've all been there, where, our kind of window of tolerance, our ability to be able to hold stress is so small that we do take it out on our safe place, our safe people. So to be able to keep coming back to yourself, you're right. It only ripple effect is that it's going to be better for the people around you. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, it would be as if we were driving a vehicle and all the passengers had a different destination, but they didn't tell us where they wanted us to go. So we're just driving around and they're frustrated and we're trying to figure it
Mm-hmm.
out and
Yeah.
it's not working. So when we realize that we have our own roadmap
Mm-hmm.
and we are focused on that and going in the direction that feels right and good, it also gives everyone permission to check in with their own roadmap. And then
Yeah.
we're all just driving along in this gorgeous carpool, and everybody's has their eye on their own path. But you're holding space, you're modeling that
Mm-hmm.
for your children, for your friends, for your
Mm-hmm.
coworkers, for your spouse, your relationships that you're in. And it just doesn't feel like that would actually work, but it totally works.
Yeah, it so does. And it's so interesting, because I think the more you get attuned to your own needs, what makes you happy, what do you need, all of that kind of stuff, then it makes it easier to articulate this stuff, right? And especially in the workplace, if you can articulate what it is you need, what helps you stay motivated, that makes managers' lives so much easier, because they're like, oh, okay, you've just given me an instruction manual. Great, let's go. Rather than this kind of guessing game. And I think that works in, romantic relationships as well. And the problem is that if we don't do that work, often as individuals, we become resentful, because we're like, well, why don't you know what I need?
Right.
Like, why can't you know?
Because I know what you need. I know what you
Right.
need. So how do you
Yeah.
not know what
Yeah.
we don't know what they need. We just think we do.
Yeah, right, right, right. And so it can be such a disconnect if we don't do this work. It really can. And and if we don't do the work, it becomes really isolating, really lonely. We can become resentful, and it's not a great place to be. So obviously it takes work and it takes investment and all of that great stuff, but the rewards, I see it the transformations for clients is just amazing. It's like, wow. Yeah.
Right? And I'm sure they feel the same way.
Right.
It's interesting, as you were talking, I was thinking about, because I know a part of your work is around grief counseling. And so if you have a client that's experiencing loss, and I'm just having this awareness in this moment. So if I'm
Yeah.
completely off, feel free to say it, because it's not like it's a long held belief. I'm just thinking, there are some people that are, of course, profoundly impacted by the loss of a parent, say.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that, in some cases, that circumstance triggers, not in a bad way, but it starts a process of therapy, that they believe that they are, getting help, getting support around
Mm-hmm.
the grief piece. But
Mm-hmm.
because it's all about us anyway, in that process, it unlocks the door to other
Yeah.
opportunities for personal growth and development. And so, because the floodgate has opened,
Mm-hmm.
we can, or a person can, associate all of that with the circumstance of the death of the parent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where my dad died and my entire world fell apart.
Yeah.
Or my dad
Mm-hmm.
died and I got some help and I realized that my whole world had fallen apart and
Mm-hmm.
I'm now rebuilding that. I mean, that was not my particular circumstance. And the only reason I'm saying that, and sorry that I have so many words because I'm trying to figure this out. When my dad died, I didn't fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an interesting feeling about that. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's because I had already started doing this internal spiritual work that had me in a place of understanding what was on his side of the street and what was on
Mm-hmm.
my side of the street. And I was sad for the few days that he was not himself, but really happy for him in his transition, and really happy for me that that was having the experience that I had.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
that was a lot. I'm glad you're a therapist. Say more about that.
Well, I did. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with me because, as we know, grief is so unique, isn't it? It's so individual. And yeah, there's so much misinformation out there. So there's this kind of where people are like, oh, shouldn't I be over this now? Isn't this,
Mhm.
these shoulds are coming in, those social expectations. But actually what we know about grief and loss is that this is about living with. This is, it changes over time and it evolves. And so how you live with that, and that's the work in therapy, is like, okay, this thing has happened, like how do we process what's happened, and then how do we then live with this loss in our lives. And I think there's so many beautiful therapeutic approaches to grief and loss, and it's a subject that I'm just so passionate about and touches so many of our lives. But there's a particular therapeutic model which is internal family systems. And what I love about internal family systems is that it gives us this idea or concept that we have these different parts and that they can coexist. So we can have a part of us that is deeply saddened by loss. And then we may have another part of us that might be like, gosh, this experience of grief and loss has changed my perspective on life, and it's made me prioritize things differently. And actually, I'm really grateful for what's happened. And those two parts and multiple parts can coexist, and it's honoring those, so I guess when we think about saying yes to ourselves, it's actually also saying yes to our parts. Like, it's okay to be really sad, And it's also okay to be really grateful for what was and for what the future holds as well.
Oh, I love that. And I would love for you to talk more about internal family systems,
Yeah,
because what also came to me when you were saying that was sometimes we think if we're only paying attention to ourselves that we're selfish, and that
right.
that's going to give us too narrow-minded, and we need
Mm-hmm.
to,
Mm-hmm.
but there are so many parts of us. It's it's a
Right.
full-time job, believe me. You will not,
Yeah.
you're not just going to get one perspective when you're focused on yourself, because
Yeah.
there are all of these parts, and
Mm-hmm.
we hear these invitations to, invite all the parts of me to the table and all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about this a little bit more, if this is a newer concept to the listener? Or, because I think when I first heard the
Mm-hmm.
title internal family systems, I thought it meant the all the players in the house that I grew up in.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I guess our parts, the idea is that we develop these different parts, and depending on what's happening in your life, some parts will be more present than others. Okay. So if we think about these different parts, and it is a family, it is self sat round a table with our parts, and we'll have younger parts. So some of your listeners may have heard of kind of inner child work or inner child healing. So you'll have younger parts. There'll be parts of you that just want to go play. Like, how do we get out of the office, and why can't we just go and play? And then there'll be other parts that maybe as you sort of learnt, were rewarded in school for hard work, or later on in your career is like, yeah, no, we must stay here. We might have another part that might be like, I need to stay here and I need to work and we need to do well. And that's what it's all about. And these parts, all of these parts are beautiful. There are no bad parts. They're all beautiful, and they're all here to help us. And it's about us working with our parts. And I guess the kind of, how do you say yes to yourself? Well, what can happen is you can have conflicting parts. So, the part that wants to play, the part that wants to stay and earn money because that's going to protect you and keep you safe and all of that great stuff. So sometimes what we have to do in being able to say yes to ourselves and our parts is that kind of negotiation piece. So how do we kindly, really gently work with both of these parts? And usually there's more than two, right?
Yes.
But
The longer we live, the more seats
yeah,
at the table
right.
required. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But in terms of these two parts that are particularly conflicting, it's okay, let's work with them. What is it they both need? Well, the part that wants to play, wants to enjoy life, wants to have fun. The other part wants, let's say, financial security and stability and safety. So what we can do is work with our parts and go, okay, how can we meet both of those needs? How can we work with those parts? How can we nurture them? How can we help them to feel less worried and meet their needs? And then what that does in a whole system of your parts is create that safety and security for us to feel more settled, and less noise. So we can, yeah, be in the present moment and enjoy things. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Would you say that, so if someone was experiencing fear or uncertainty, that some things that we might call an emotion
Hmm.
or a belief system, I, for many, many, many years, had developed a belief system that there's no fun till the chores are done, which
Right.
is, it's always helpful if it rhymes. I grew up in church, so like I know that the sermon notes land better if there's a rhyme in there. And I have a bed and breakfast on a small flower farm, so there is no opportunity
Hmm.
of the chores ever being done because
Right.
they generate themselves. And so I'm in 2025, my mantra is to let it be easy. And
Mm.
those two, which I, consider belief systems, but I, believe they're parts, where
Yeah.
I've got the good girl,
Hmm.
and there's also a fear part
in
Mm-hmm.
there that
Mm-hmm.
says, that is nonsense. That's irresponsible. And how
Mm-hmm.
dare you? How dare you? I don't know which girl that is. She's mean, but she says, how dare you use this microphone to tell
Mm.
people that letting it be easy is an option? That is
Right. Okay.
irresponsible for you. How can you even tell people they can say yes to themselves? Like, what kind of
Mm.
frivolous nonsense? Like, it's mean
Yeah.
in there.
Yeah, and I wonder what the intention is, because when we think about these parts, there's always a good intention. It might
Right?
not be
Safety.
obvious, right? It might not be obvious from the get-go, but this part not only is worried about you, but is also worried about your listeners as well. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what is driving that? And then, just as we do with children, right? The behavior is one thing, but it's what's behind the behavior, what's driving that, and then working with that part, and what is it they need to know that it's okay? What is it they need to know that it's okay to do this, you know?
Right. Yes. Thank you for that. And it's,
Yeah.
in that particular instant with coming up with my mantra for the year was whoever the part is that knows everything, um, or thinks they know everything, said, like, there's no evidence that letting it be easy is a sustainable model for success.
Right.
But then another really, really smart part who's quieter, but said, actually, we have some evidence. The evidence that it can be easy and successful and full of joy is this podcast. I love
Right.
every single thing about this podcast. And a huge part of that is thanks to Shannon Warner, my producer. So all I have to do is have these gorgeous conversations. And then many weeks later, I'm in my car and I see, oh, there's a new podcast. How about that? That's magic. It's so great. So that was, I know our mind is always looking for evidence that
Mm,
this thought is true. And if we let that mean girl or the good girl or the fear monger who's saying, like, oh my gosh, this is never going to work, you're going to lose
mm,
everything and whatever. Like, I can't even say those words. That does not feel good in my body. But
yeah.
I can I can now look for proof of where has it been easy. And when
Mm-hmm.
I lean into that,
Mm-hmm.
more ideas and more ideas and more ideas and creativity, and how can
Yeah.
I be at play and still get my chores done? Well,
Mm-hmm.
because I delight in the work of my hands, and I love when I look out the window that I can see the fruit of my labor, and
Mm,
it's good. So there's a lot of spinning the
mm-hmm.
narrative, but it's not me talking myself out of more sound advice. It's just giving another person, another part at the
Mm-hmm.
table, the microphone
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
say, well, I actually have something to say about this. And everyone
Right.
gets to have their place, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to let that mean girl, she doesn't get to drive the truck because
Right.
it's not where I want to go.
Yeah. Right. And I guess, in terms of thinking about that and thinking about your part, so it was beautiful that you had a part that came forward and said, hang on a minute, there's some evidence here, so that your part, when you get to a point where your parts can work together, that's beautiful, isn't it? It's kind of that team. That's what we want in organizations, in businesses, is kind of focusing on each other's strengths. And I guess when we think about this part that is sort of you're identifying as the mean girl part, is kind of, well, what strengths is this part bringing?
Yeah.
What is it that, how is this part trying to protect you? Because our parts will just try and protect us. So, and then when we look at it like that and we go, gosh, this part that we're sort of recognizing as a mean girl part is really trying to protect us, it then
Yes.
challenges this like thought process of, well, is this part so mean, or is this part scared? Is this
Right.
part afraid of what's going to
Yep.
happen? Right.
and she doesn't feel heard. So
Right.
she keeps talking.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. It's so
So she's
interesting.
persistent. Yeah. She's a persistent
Yes.
part. Yeah.
Yes. I have my car. I had this old car that I loved so much, and it just served its purpose and it was gone. So I had to replace it begrudgingly. And this new car has this safety feature that it makes quite an alerting sound when it
Okay.
thinks it's a pre-collision situation.
Ah.
But I live in rural Massachusetts, so there are windy roads and trees and woods, and some days it's trash day, so someone will have a trash can out, and the car is alerting me of
Hmm.
a pre-collision. And
Yeah.
I'm able to say, because I know about a little bit about this work that you're talking about,
Mm.
I'm just using that as a way to
Yeah.
calm down that part. And I just think, thank you, car. Like, I see that looks
Yeah.
scary for you, but I've got this. I can see it's a trash
Right.
can and that the road
Right.
turns and we're
Yeah.
okay. But thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for sounding the alarm. I've
Hmm.
got this.
Right. And so what can sometimes happen is that these parts develop in the point in our lives when we really need them, like we need them, like massively need them to survive. And then what can happen is our situation changes, we become more experienced. And like you said, you don't feel you need that alarm in the car. So I guess for when we think about the part is okay, how could we help this part have another job role? Okay,
Mm,
so what would that job role look like? Because, we all need purpose, all of us. That's what keeps us alive. That's what gets us up in the morning. So sometimes some of the work that we can do with our parts is kind of helping them realize this is where we are now. We're not where we were. We're not back when this part developed and when it took on the job that it's got. And actually, we're in a different place now. So, kind of updating them as to where we are. And what would they like to do now? What kind of stuff is it that they'd like to do to help us and to help all the other parts? So, that's some of the work that can be just so, like I said earlier, transformational in
right.
creating that internal harmony, right?
Yes. And there's so much compassion. We have
Mm,
compassion for these parts because we've identified them in such a way that they almost feel like they're outside of us because we're imagining a frightened child. We're
right.
imagining someone who felt ill prepared or
Mm-hmm.
whatever circumstance created the part and the role that they had. I mean, I know that there's this practice as well when we are talking about our own bodies. If
Mm-hmm.
there's, you know, culture has made me think as a woman that there's only one way to look that's acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I look in the mirror and I don't look like her, I'm that mean girl. And
Right.
so two things that really helped, one was raising a daughter. So that
Mm-hmm.
helped clean up my language really fast. And the second was this book that I read by Jen Hatmaker called Fierce, Free, and Full of Fire. I had to look at my bookshelf. And she talks about, I think she's actually even talking about another author that did this, but all to say, referring to your body as her
Okay.
and how there's compassion comes in a
Mm.
third person
Yeah. Yeah.
point of view.
It's
And
so
just like I
true.
would never say anything about my best friend's thighs, I would never say
Mm.
anything about my daughter's thighs. So I'm treating my
Yeah.
her like I would treat her. And
Mm.
it just allows, it's what we were talking about at the beginning. It's that pause. It's
Yeah.
that opportunity to have a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a minute. It takes a shift in the habit of thought and this default creating, like we talked about at the beginning as well. There's so much power in the pause.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And sometimes our parts can be become burdened with like cultural expectations or like family traditions that no longer serve us anymore. So sometimes those parts can if we do the work, we can pass those burdens back. So, this kind of when I think about when I was growing up and all of the information, in like magazines that you would read about
Right.
body and body image and all of that kind of stuff. So sometimes some of the work that you can do with your parts is like, how about we hand that back? Let's give that back, let's give that magazine back to the publisher. It's not for us. This is not healthy for us. This is not how we're going to work now. So we can hand that back. And it might be beliefs, it might be I'm just sort of trying to think of some personal examples for me is, I know I definitely parent differently to what my mother's, did. And so sometimes there's an element of passing that back and kind of going, okay, well, that might have been relevant in your time, in your generation, but for my children, this is different. There are different considerations that I need to make. But again, going back to your point, you can't do that unless you pause, right? Because otherwise you're just on autopilot. Well, this is what my mother did, so I'm just going to do it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Or this is what my mother did, so I'm going to do the opposite.
Right.
But
Yeah,
there might
exactly.
be something in the middle that's actually better.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah,
you have more
right.
than one child, there's probably a different thing for because they're all different.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah. So this kind
Right.
of blanket approach, it's so important to do that kind of pause, that check in with our parts, how, and particularly we were talking about grief and loss, how are we feeling? How are these parts? And giving them a voice, giving them the space. And I think what you said there about that third person, if we can create a bit of distance between ourselves and our parts and see that part as I know when my nan died, and still it affects me today because we live with grief and loss. It's not something you get over. But I remember, just the younger parts of me that just desperately missed her and desperately, wanted to pick up the phone and have a conversation and all of those kinds of things. So, and then I've got other parts that are, kind of embodying my nan,
Yeah.
so there's some gifts that we want to take from previous generations as well. I mean, she was a fantastic listener. She was incredibly compassionate. So it's kind of the great thing is you can kind of draw down what you want to keep as well as what do you want to
Right.
give back,
Right. Which I think is so beautiful that you brought her up because speaking of the pause, there's a generation between you and your nan, right?
Right, right.
So it's this up-leveled perspective, just like we're
Mm,
having on our inner child, because now we are the adult version of her.
mm-hmm,
We can show compassion. Our grandmothers aren't worried about what we're going to eat for dinner. So they can just sit with us and read a book and tell us how proud they are of us, right?
exactly,
Like they
right.
get to be that really important role
Mm,
that our mom is not available for because she's doing
yeah.
all the things.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I'm one of three, so that I had that time with my nan, whereas like, it's very difficult when you're juggling so many different people and work and all of that kind of stuff. So these relationships, isn't it? The different relationships and how they help and support. And I think this can also impact how we grieve and what are we grieving? What is the
Right.
loss? What is the because it's the person, right? But it's also what did that person bring to your life? What was the meaning of that relationship? And I think this is where I find it really difficult because often people don't have it's quite common for people to be quite dismissive of people's losses and like, oh
Mhm.
well, they weren't your blood relative or
Right.
they
Or it was
might
your
like
cat or something.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's not, it's about the relationship. What did that person or pet or whatever that was bring to your life, because that's the loss, isn't it? That's the huge hole that we're left with.
Yes, thank you for that, because that leads me to my next question, which, I mean, you tell me if it's a whole nother podcast interview, but do we use the same tools for grieving a person that we use for grieving a relationship or a career or any transition in our life, children going to college, a divorce, or even the idea, infertility, all of these things that have just kind of a built-in quote unquote norm, but then it also transitions or it doesn't happen at all. And it feels like a more internal journey, even though they all are. So I guess the question is, do we use the same tools of grieving the loss of a person as grieving the idea of a marriage that wasn't
Yeah,
that
yeah.
idea?
I think the tools are really similar. I think the differences are we going to allow ourselves to grieve it? Do we give ourselves permission to honor that grief and to recognize that this is grief? Because I think sometimes we kind of feel that grief is about bereavement and people dying, but like you've described, it's not. It's so much broader than that. There's, and personally in my own life right now, one of the things that I'm grieving is late diagnosis of ADHD. Like what would my life have been like if I'd had an earlier diagnosis? And I have conflicting parts around that. I'm like, I have parts that are like, but we know now, let's go and enjoy life now. But I have parts that are really sad that I didn't have this knowledge, and how might that have helped me? So there are all these different types of grief and loss. And then there's some that are more socially acceptable. And then there are some that are not accepted, that are not supported, that, and so I guess the difference in it is the support network, because what is support is outside of therapy for that individual. I've experienced bereavement to suicide, and that is very it's very taboo subject, and people often want to avoid talking about it. So sometimes it's about finding it can be about finding other people who have experienced a similar loss, because you might not get that from your circle. And if your circle are also going through their own experiences of grief and loss, then that's really difficult because they're dealing with their loss, you've got your loss. So I think it's more the differences around support network as opposed to the kind of therapeutic tools and models. I think they're relevant for all of these different kinds of grief and loss. But what I notice is like, is it socially acceptable? And a lot of people I work with may have experienced a loss 10 years ago, and they might come into a session and they'll be like, what's wrong with me? Why am I experiencing this? And, it's 10 years and people told me I'd feel better by now. And, I'm feeling ashamed and all of that kind of stuff. So some of the work that we're doing is actually, it's okay to feel this way, and let's work with it. And it's difficult because 10 years down the line, people can sometimes be, oh, does that still upset you? This is so it comes a lot to what is the support network? Where is the support for individuals?
That's such a beautiful answer. Thank you. And I think what you said before as well, the question of what did this relationship bring to your life? You're grieving the loss of that, as
Right.
well as the loss of the person. So then that makes it an easier transition to say, yes, I'm grieving my cat. Like this cat, this dog, this
Yeah.
dress meant so much. And obviously, we assign all the meaning that it has, but
Yeah.
it's still reciprocal. And when that garment or human or pet is no longer there, job, relationship, whatever it is, it could even be I'm divorced, so I can grieve the, removal of this man who was such a dear friend.
Mm-hmm.
We had so much fun and we laughed so much. It's great to be married to your friend, and you kind of want to be more than friends if you're going to be
Yes.
married. So,
Right.
I can grieve that too.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
all of these elements that
Mm.
are, yeah, there, it's just so much. It's all to
Mm-hmm.
say, friends, get a good therapist that can help you, because it is,
Yeah.
and don't, and also, I think there's a stigma, like you said, of like what's socially acceptable
Mm-hmm.
for what or whom you're grieving, but also how long it takes.
Yeah.
And it takes as long as it takes, because I just, in that
Mm-hmm.
25-second little rampage, touched on a whole bunch of things that had nothing to do with my divorce. Right?
Mm.
So there, it's just
Mm-hmm.
once you are open to receiving this
Mm-hmm.
healing, it's continuous, just like your life keeps going on.
Yeah.
Your healing and your evolution goes on and on as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't know what your thoughts are, but sometimes there can be a like self-judgment around like, oh, do I still need to be in therapy? Because some of my clients, we start off weekly, and then we might go fortnightly, and then we might go monthly. And sometimes people kind of feel like, oh, like they're failing in some way, that they're still in
Mm.
therapy, or that, they're having monthly sessions and things like that. And sometimes it's like the goal not to need therapy. And I wonder where that comes from. What's the burden? Like where's these kind of beliefs and things like that? Because I feel like if that's what we need, and if it
Right.
helps us and it
Yes.
improves our relationships, just like eating healthily, drinking water, if that's what's helping us, why do we feel like we suddenly have to put a like deadline on it or
Right.
something like that? And I guess that's again comes back to that saying yes to yourself.
Yeah.
It's kind of, and I know because of my job role that I will always be in therapy. I will always be working with a therapist.
Mhm.
Um, but I also wonder, like, in terms of other people who aren't therapists, that's okay too, right? It's okay to come
Right.
in and out of therapy, because life can be really tough, and there can be lots of loss, lots of change, lots of difficult circumstances. So to have that kind of anchor point can be really
Yes.
helpful.
And you can change it up. Right?
Right.
So it's also knowing how long to go with
Hmm.
a certain therapist and when it's time to
Yeah,
complete. And it doesn't
that's
mean
true.
that you're done with
Hmm.
therapy. It just means that
No.
this partnership it's time to complete.
Yeah.
I it Sometimes we need to change hairstylists. Sometimes we need to change
Yeah.
houses. It's just a part of it, but it comes back to, again, realizing that we have our own roadmap, and
Mm,
the decisions that we, for marriages that last, I believe, you married this person, but you both grew and you
yeah.
both evolved, and you're
Mm,
different people than you were on your wedding day, and you're still together and you're still in it because you're both growing. You don't have to be the same
yeah.
person, but it's also it's happening in all of our relationships. Our
Mm,
roles as mothers change. Amelia
right.
does not need my help blow drying her hair. Like, she
Mm,
can do her own thing now, and it doesn't mean I'm any less her mother. She still needs
yeah.
a ride, right? But it just evolves and
Then
changes.
yeah, the needs change, don't they?
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. And that
right.
can be really hard. I'm feeling that at the moment. My youngest son not long ago turned 18, and so that kind of independence and things like that. And that's a change in job role, isn't it? It's kind of like, okay, now, and that could be really hard in the workplace. Like, oh gosh, I've been used to this job role for so long, and now I've got to do something else. And you kind of miss the comfortability of what it was before, and then it changes. And so that can be hard. I mean, I'm so proud, like, I'm so proud of my
Right.
son, but there is definitely a part of me that's like, oh, like, you need me and you don't need me in these ways, but you need me in different ways. So,
Right. And then there's also that social norm of
mm,
that a birthday, now you're 18, like everything changes now
yeah,
because of this. And is that true? And were you really,
right. Yeah.
quote unquote 18 a couple of years ago in
Mm,
these areas,
hmm
but are you about 13 in these other areas?
Yeah.
It's
And it's
just
really, it's so
independent,
interesting.
right?
Yeah. It's so interesting you say that, because I was just thinking about a theme in some of the adult clients that I work with, in the kind of feeling like they shouldn't need their mums.
Hmm.
And I find that really interesting, that and it's
Hmm.
like, where is that coming from? This, like, I shouldn't need to phone my mum, or I shouldn't need to, and it's like, where does that come from? Because, like you say, who decided that there's a cutoff point as to when you need your mom?
Right.
It's,
And that,
yeah.
I mean, even as you say that, of course, I need my mom and I'm glad
Mm,
she's here. Do we talk with any regularity? No.
yeah.
Does
Yeah.
she know that I think she's amazing? Yes. Do I know that she thinks I'm amazing? Yes, indeed. And it's
Right.
so there's just no
There's no rule
way.
on this, is there?
Right. My auntie thinks it's weird. What do you mean you didn't call your mom this week? Like, oh gosh, no, I don't even know when we actually talked last on the phone. And all is
Mm,
well. So we are all making this up,
yeah.
and it's
Right.
also all made up.
Yeah. And I think that again comes back to listening to your needs, doesn't it? It's kind of,
Mm,
what is it you need? And does this work for the other person? And, and then working with that, rather than like feeling like you have to go to the rule book and be like, is this
right.
socially acceptable? Should I be doing this as a 40-year-old person? Is this what I should be doing? And actually it's like, is it cool for me? Is it cool for them? Are we okay? Cool.
Right.
That's all right. Yeah.
Right. And then it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
matter what anybody else thinks. And
Hmm.
that can feel scary, but
Hmm.
just try it. And
Mm,
just experience what freedom feels like for
yeah.
about a day, and you will not go back.
Yeah. Yeah. I worked with a lot of parents, and one of the things that I like talking about is kind of, okay, so you've been given this job description of how to be a parent. What I'd like you to do is tear that up and then write
Hmm.
your own.
Right. And then
Yeah.
change it all
Yeah,
the time.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And it evolves exactly as we've just said, that kind of, okay, my job description, is, I'm not having to put so many hours in now. He's 18,
Right.
so it's like, okay. So, yeah.
Right. Oh my gosh. It's so good. I have loved this conversation,
Yeah, it's been
Irma.
great. Thank
Thank you
you.
so much. Please tell everyone where they can find and follow you, how they can know more about
Yeah.
all of the really fabulous things that you're up to.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite places to hang out is LinkedIn. So please connect up with me on LinkedIn. So it's Emma Tomes. And then there's a few different websites that I have. So Mental Health People, which is where we talk a lot about mental health training. And then we've got the Grief Therapist website, where it's more focused on helping people with grief and loss. So yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Yes, we will link everything down in the show notes. But thank you so much for your time. I've loved it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great. It's flown by so quick.
Right? I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. As always, any links or notes mentioned can be found at phineaswrighthouse.com in the podcast section of our site, or in the show notes below. And if you haven't connected with me personally, come find me on Instagram at Phineas Wrighthouse and let me know you listened to this episode. I'd love to get to know you. Thank you for sharing this time with me. I know your days are full, and I'm really grateful that you chose to spend some of your precious time right here.
Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any of these delightful conversations. I'll see you next week.